This video, guys, we're going to be doing a fun video. We're going to be comparing electronics and clothing together and weighing some pros and cons. Hopefully this can help some people out decide what they want to sell on eBay. All right, guys, if you guys are new to the channel, I used to have a 16,000 item electronics store, so I'm very familiar with electronics. I know the ins and outs of all kinds of electronics, and I have sold over 30,000 electronics, to put that in perspective. And I recently started doing a lot of clothing, and I have been doing pretty good with it. I have sold 1,200 items in the last 90 days. Just pure clothing for the most part. I do a little bit of electronics, but for the most part, it's mainly clothing. 95% of my sales come from clothing right now, but I do want to start adding a little more electronics. I have a little bit right here that I wanted to demonstrate and weigh out the pros and the cons of these and the pros and the cons of these. The number one thing was the biggest factor of me going more all into clothing was that I had lost a very good recycling center supplier that was supplying me with a ton of electronics. That's how I was able to get a lot of them. I met that person through the flea market, and just from being consistent going to a lot of different flea markets, I met that person. Then I eventually ended up going to the actual place where all the electronics were coming from. So that's how I got that supplier. Ever since then, guys, I have not found another electronic supplier whatsoever that came even close to that. The con of electronics is that they are not easy to find in bulk. It's very hard to find e-waste electronics that are just readily available in most places. The good thing about clothing is that it is extremely accessible. Every single human on earth owns a piece of clothing. Now, not all clothing is good, and not all clothing is good to sell on eBay especially, but it is way more available than electronics. When I first started getting into clothing, guys, I didn't really know what I was doing. I remember when I first was going to get into clothing, I figured, hey, I could just go get a bunch of Nike, Adidas, Under Armour, and just a bunch of clothing, put it all in my eBay store, and I'm gonna get rich. That was my thought process. After a couple of months, I realized very quickly that I did not know what I was doing when it came to clothing, and that I had to completely learn it, learn all the nuances, learn a bunch of brands, learn what makes something more valuable than others, how to learn about fabrics, sizes, all this kind of stuff, right? It's like a whole learning curve when it comes to clothing. And that's something I had to learn the hard way, just putting in work and just being extremely consistent, searching up thousands of items week to week, like literally just immersed into learning the clothing category. With electronics, the good thing about electronics, you don't have to know anything about an electronic. You can just search up a model number. Almost every single electronic has a model number. Sony Cybershot DSC W55. That's it. That's all you need to know. You found it, and you're gonna know exactly how much it goes for. If you don't know much about clothing, I know all this stuff right here goes for $25 on average because I already know, and I had already searched up a bunch of items. But when you're out there at the Goodwill bins or at the flea market, and there are some people with like tables full of clothing, you're not gonna know which ones are worth picking up and which ones are worth picking up. You're gonna see a jean right next to each other. One is worth $5, one is worth 40. This right here is a Juicy Couture jean right here that, you know, I'm gonna put up for $40, and it's gonna be right next to the jean that looks very similar to it that's only worth $5. And the only way you know that is by searching it up, looking up the comps. But how do you find this same exact one to really get a base price of what it goes for? It's just a lot of little nuances like that that go into clothing that take a while to find out, like the differences and the learning curve. Day one going into electronics, no matter what electronic you touch, for the most part, you're gonna be able to find it. Now with electronics, there are some very unique pieces that, you know, I can't even find sometimes. I have an item somewhere around here that I still don't know what the heck it is. All right, guys, I found it for you guys because I was like, I have to show you. I don't know what it is. I searched this up on Google. There's nothing that pops up on it. Model number, brand, nothing. But that's very rare. But yeah, guys, for the most part, it is very, very easy to find which electronic you have in your hand. And it is a little bit much harder to find out whether a piece of clothing is gonna be worth your time picking up, listing, shipping, and all that stuff. A lot of the questions that I get when it comes to electronics is the testing part. The testing part is honestly kind of complicated. So from my experience, I try to only get electronics that I can easily test, that I am ready to test. I have about 4 of these Xbox Ones. With all the consoles that I get the same consoles over and over again. So I just keep the cables. I keep Wii cables, I keep Xbox One cables, original Xbox cables, PS3 cables, a bunch of PS2 cables, and those are just a bunch of cables that I keep on me, and I sell these without the cable included, but they are tested. And I just have like a little TV, I'm gonna show you guys right here. And so you guys know, like I literally have, I don't know, like 6 PS2s right here, a couple of Xbox 360s. I already have the cables for these. So whenever I test out, you know, a bunch of PS2s, because I get them all the time, I just keep the cables, plug them in one by one. I keep a couple of CDs, games and controllers in hand so I can test them all out. Right there I have another Xbox original. Right here I have another one. I have a bunch of Wii's right here. And for the most part, I try to just stick with stuff that I can easily test. When I was at my peak doing electronics, guys, I'm gonna be honest, and I've always been honest about this, I wasn't the best at testing them. Sometimes I would just be like, this is good. Let's just put it up. And I'm not trying to do that anymore. And my feedback on my eBay store has really reflected that. I was at a 92.1 or something crazy like that, and now I'm almost at 99%. And just because I made that switch, and then I started doing clothing. With clothing, obviously, you don't have to test anything. The most work you put into an item is washing it, and that's literally it. So that's the great part about clothing, is that the processing time gets cut down immensely. Like the worst case scenario is that you wash something. I don't buy stuff that needs more treatment than just washing. If I come across something that needs like an extra bit of work or something like that, I don't mess with it. This jean right here is a little project right here that I want to make into shorts, right? And they're gonna sell great if I make them into shorts. And I have like a pile of 5 of these that I have right there, and I just forget about them every single time. I don't like projects. I don't like stuff that I have to put more time than I have to. Like the most I will do for an item is wash it. There's so much clothing, it's so abundant that there's no point in me putting more work into just washing. So if it needs more, if it's a little project, I just leave it. The electronics, it's a project no matter what. Like you're gonna have to do something to it to test it out, to make sure it works, unless it's just literally putting batteries in. Even then, that's something right there. I've talked about this in another video, is that for the most part, if you get 10,000 random electronics all strung out, for the most part, most of them are gonna be like $30 and up. And there's gonna be some crazy expensive stuff in there. You get 10,000 pieces of clothing coming out of the Goodwill bins or out of Rack House, maybe 3% of that is actually good and is actually worth putting up on eBay. That is actually worth $20 to $25 and up. There's way more inherent value into electronics compared to clothing for the most part. There are some pieces of clothing that are extremely expensive, that are very unique, that cost a lot of money. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, electronics are worth way more than clothing if you just compare overall to overall. My average sales price for the electronics right now is like $80. There's some stuff that is just so expensive, and it's way easier for me to find a very expensive electronic than for me to find a very expensive piece of clothing. I feel like I have a nice little combination of both things going on right now, where all this stuff right here is just my bread and butter, things that I sell 17 to 20 items a day that are $20 to $25. And then with my electronics, I'll get one random sale. Yesterday, I sold one of these camcorders for $110 on top of all the other clothing that I sold. Back then, I used to get a ton of these, but now I don't. But here and there, if I sell like one thing like that a day, here and there, that makes a massive difference. And I feel like that's just a great combination. Another con when it came to electronics was the cost of shipping, and not necessarily the label. It was the materials for the shipping. You have to buy bubble wrap. You have to have a lot of boxes on hand. All those costs get added up over time. It really does get a little expensive. Like I said, the average cost of every electronic is just way more inherently more valuable. You get more money for it, so it kind of evens out. But like spending $100 every 2 weeks on bubble wrap gets expensive. Buying $100 worth of boxes gets expensive. With clothing, all this stuff right here goes for the most part in the same poly bag, except for these like leather jackets. I have a different size poly bag, but it's still like a 20-cent thing. That is it. There's no tape, there's no boxes, and the time is extremely limited to ship the item. Every single one is gonna take exactly the same time to ship, no matter what. If I were to ship all these electronics right here, you got this Wii right here is gonna be a completely different box than this one right here. This Sega right here is gonna be a completely different box than this JVC. We got a PS2 flat right here, completely different size. Also, if I sell like one of these speakers right here, or that receiver, or that subwoofer, or any of those receivers down there, it's all different stuff, different weights that, you know, it adds a lot of time into the processing and shipping these items. I think for me moving forward, my scale, my massive store is gonna be from clothing, because it's so accessible. Right now, every single day, I can go and grab 200 pieces of clothing every single day I want. I'm not doing that quite yet. Last week I did that 3 days and I picked up 600 pieces of clothing, but that's something I can do at scale. I can just do it to infinity, right? With electronics, it's very hard to do at scale. I did do that, but it's a very big headache. Not so much of a headache because you do make a lot of money, but it is harder to come by these pieces right here that really move quickly, that are easy to test and readily available to you to purchase. Everyone is looking out for these same things right here that knows about electronics and video games, so it is just much harder to do that. All this stuff right here, there's really no competition with the kind of clothing that I get, because it's just very normal bread and butter brands. For the most part, all the people around my area are looking for like hype stuff or stuff that is just really expensive, and they just buy a couple of things. So that's my leverage right there, is that I am buying lower end stuff that sells slightly slower than most people, but you know, for the most part, this is making me great money right now. All right guys, so a con about the clothing is that it takes up way more space for the most part compared to some electronics. The kind of electronics that I would love getting, that were my bread and butter, were little tiny small stuff that fits in your hand. And for the most part, my bread and butter for clothing is always about this size right here. Whether it's a jacket, shirt, short, jean, it doesn't matter, it's about this size. And all these boxes are full like that. Back then, I used to have 600 boxes like this full of electronics. As you guys can see right here, this box is almost empty, like halfway empty, because honestly, they just move so quickly. You can fit like 30 electronics in this box right here, versus these boxes right here, you can fit about 25 at most, you know, jeans or pieces of clothing. As you guys can see, we do have a lot of it, and it is very filled out, but it does take up way more space than electronics. Right here, if I were to fill it all up with small electronics, it could easily fit like 15,000 items, but with clothing, it's going to be probably maxed out at like 4,500 to 5,000 items around there. I remember I used to have a 6,500, 7,000 item store, all in like one of these racks right here. Like literally top to bottom, all white boxes, just full of tiny electronics. Depending on which electronics and obviously which clothing you guys are selling, the sell-through rate for the most part, overall generalizing it, electronics sell way faster than clothing. If you just generalize all the clothing that's out there in the world, electronics for me sell very, very quickly. Also, it's because like I know what to look out for. I know the stuff that just sells for me very consistently. But for the most part, electronics in general are just going to sell way faster than clothing. Now, there are a lot of people out there that have a 100% sell-through rate store of just clothing, and they only get that kind of stuff. So that's the kind of results they get. So there is clothing out there, obviously, that is 100% sell-through rate, that sells every 90 days, no matter what. So there is high demand clothing out there. And if you think that it's all slow, that it's all saturated, that there's no good clothing, then you're wrong, because there are some great brands that sell just as good as electronics out there. You just have to know about them. Now I have a question for you guys. What do you guys like to sell? Do you guys like to sell shoes, hard goods, electronics, clothing? Comment down below your thoughts on this whole entire video, guys, and I can't wait to see what you guys say. I'm replying to every single comment. I'm gonna catch you guys later.